faithfully conveying value by interpreting the world's great books. Hello, this is Sally Book Talk. Today we'll be discussing the book called The Neglected Child. The subtitle is How to Overcome Childhood Emotional Neglect. Looking back at your childhood, have you ever encountered such a situation? When you had a disagreement with a classmate at school and came home feeling down, your mom was busy preparing dinner and your dad was focused on watching the news. Neither noticed that you were upset. So you hid in your room, processing your emotions alone, and thought it was normal. But the author of this book believes this is a typical case of emotional neglect. So what is emotional neglect? It refers to a situation where the emotional needs of the neglected person are not met. So children who suffer long-term emotional neglect in childhood are likely to feel that life has no meaning, that they have no self-worth, and may even end up depressed as adults. This book has two authors, Jonas Webb and Christine Musello. Webb is a clinical psychology doctor and a pioneer in the research of childhood emotional neglect. With nearly 30 years in the profession, he is an expert in treating emotional neglect issues in individuals, couples, and families. In his long career, he found that emotional neglect is almost everywhere, but rarely noticed or acknowledged, leading to irreversible rifts in many families. Therefore, he wrote this book, hoping that more people can recognize and address emotional neglect. The other author, Dr. Musello, provided many clinical cases for this book. This book is hailed by the psychology community as a groundbreaking work that first proposed and deeply interpreted childhood emotional neglect. And Ye Zhuan, a member of the American Psychological Science Association, commented on the Neglected Child book, pointing out these deeply hidden problems and pain points in family mechanisms, providing extremely valuable guidance for the mission of family affection. Next, I'll divide the book into 3 parts to explain. Part 1. What are the characteristics of emotional neglect? And why does it occur? Part 2. What are the effects of long-term emotional neglect? Part 3. How to reduce the harm caused by emotional neglect. Let's start with Part 1. What are the characteristics of emotional neglect? And why does it occur? In the author's view, parental emotional neglect usually manifests in 2 ways. The first is called acute empathy failure. Failure refers to neglect during major crisis moments. For example, a child has diarrhea due to anxiety before the college entrance exam, but the parents don't pay attention. The second type is called chronic empathy failure. Failure refers to persistently ignoring certain needs of the child during their growth period. For example, pure emotional neglect, where parents consistently overlook aspects like the child's social interactions, learning, mental development, and growth, is very hard to detect. Unlike material neglect or physical abuse, which leave traces, many children who experience emotional neglect have their other needs well met. Their families may appear perfect, but they are perpetually under the shadow of neglect inside. Since emotional neglect is often well concealed, how can we identify it? The author suggests starting from its opposite, which is a healthy emotional relationship. A healthy emotional relationship between parents and children has 3 characteristics. First, parents can feel an emotional connection with their child, which is empathy. Second, parents pay attention to their child and see them as a unique and independent individual, not an extension of themselves, a possession, or even a burden. And third, based on this emotional connection and attention to the child, parents can appropriately respond to the child's emotional needs. Let's look at a case study. One day, Zach's teacher complained to his mother, saying that Zach talked back to the teacher in class and got into a conflict. At this point, a mother in a healthy emotional relationship would act like this. First, the mother would empathize with Zach because she knows Zach usually likes the teacher, and he must be frustrated about this conflict. Second, she would think of the child as an independent individual and consider what he needs to learn from this incident. For example, explaining to Zach why the teacher was angry and what the teacher would expect him to do next time in a similar situation. Finally, the mother would also wonder if this backtalk is a signal that Zach's emotional needs weren't met. For instance, Zach might have wanted the teacher to notice him, or through the teacher, get the parents to notice him. But what would a mother under emotional neglect do? And
She would angrily confront Zach. How could you talk back to the teacher in class?
do you know how wrong your behavior is? You made me lose face in front of the teacher. Why did I raise a child like you? If the mother does this, it's clear emotional neglect. First, without understanding Zach's motives and feelings, the mother jumped to conclusions about the situation, failing to establish an emotional connection with the child. Um, Secondly, the moment she hears about this, she flies into a rage, feeling that Zach's behavior has embarrassed her, showing she views the child as an extension of herself rather than an independent individual. Lastly, she didn't pay attention to Zach's emotional needs in this situation, let alone respond to them. The above is how to identify emotional neglect, but by the time we notice emotional neglect, the damage has often already been done. Therefore, only by exploring how emotional neglect occurs can we find ways to heal the harm it causes. The author believes that the emergence of emotional neglect is closely tied to parenting styles. In the book, he summarizes 4 major types of parents prone to causing emotional neglect. The first type is highly controlling parents with extreme dominance. They hardly listen to their children's opinions and just want them to obey obediently. They believe they're always right. Narcissistic parents, authoritarian parents who rigidly follow Jade must be carved to become useful, strict discipline philosophy, and perfection-driven parents expecting all-round excellence all fall into this category. And this type of parent has 3 typical characteristics. First, they never recognize children as independent individuals. Instead, they see them merely as extensions of themselves. Thus, they unilaterally define children's needs and make decisions or demand obedience without consultation. And additionally, they expect perfection from their children to bring them glory. At minimum, children shouldn't embarrass them as parents. For instance, when a child misses a crucial shot in basketball, ordinary parents feel regret, but controlling parents feel humiliated and outraged, even publicly shaming the child. Second, highly controlling parents severely lack empathy. They either can't understand children's feelings or dismiss them as unimportant, indirectly ignoring them. Finally, the love they give forbids refusal or resistance. Many equate children's obedience with love. In other words, if children obey obediently, they interpret it as love. Conversely, if children question or disobey, they see it as rebellion. When children express needs or desires, they simply accuse them of selfishness. Over time, children are deprived of opportunities to understand their nature and feelings. They must hide their true selves, and some even blame themselves for having these unacceptable needs instead of blaming their parents. This guilt accumulated from childhood often leads to lack of self-awareness, emotional consciousness, and self-care during adolescence or adulthood. For example, Chow Ying-zi in the TV drama A Little Reunion, whose mother completely centered her life around her, considering her in every way and putting her first in everything. But in reality, she didn't even know what her daughter liked most or excelled at. And even when she found out, she didn't care. The love she gave was a self-gratifying kind of love. In the end, this suffocating love became unbearable for Chow Yinzi, leading to depression. The second type, low-support parents, are completely different from the highly controlling type. But their typical characteristics are having no high expectations for their children and lacking care, including permissive parents who use "don't worry, just be happy" as a mantra, divorced or widowed parents due to various reasons, and workaholics who prioritize career over family. Workaholic parents. Depressed parents who constantly think, "I can't do anything right, I'm just unlucky," are also typical low support types. First, let's examine permissive parents. On the positive side, they just want their children to grow up happily. On the negative side, they simply want to avoid trouble, since setting no limits or rules prevents conflicts with their children. But without boundaries, children lack sufficient parental feedback and don't know what kind of person they should become or which behaviors are inappropriate. American sociologist Charles Cooley of the Chicago School proposed the looking glass self theory, stating that human behavior depends on self perception and self concept forms through interactions with others. Others' evaluations and attitudes serve as a mirror reflecting the self. For children, their parents' evaluations and attitudes are the most crucial mirror during development. Without this mirror, children inevitably lose their sense of self, while permissive parents actively abandon positive guidance and expectations, causing emotional neglect. Then, divorced, widowed, depressed, and workaholic parents are consumed by negative emotions and life pressures, unable to provide adequate care and support, thus causing emotional neglect. For instance, in divorced or widowed families, when one or both parents are grieving, they teeter on the edge of collapse while desperately trying to cope with life. As a result, they easily overlook their children's feelings and may even directly transfer their negative emotions to them, telling the child, "If it weren't for you, we wouldn't be stuck like this. What will we do in our later years carrying you as a burden?" In workaholic families, parents derive more satisfaction from career success than their children's growth.
Consequently, they pay insufficient attention to children's needs, always prioritizing work over emotional needs.
Moreover, workaholic parents don't actively engage in their children's achievements and victories. For example, when a child wins a ball game, parents on the sidelines remain buried in work or absent entirely, missing the chance to celebrate. Over time, the child's self-worth and self-esteem become severely damaged. Despite material comfort, their hearts remain empty of love, sometimes leading to self-blame. Thus, low self-worth, low self-esteem, and self-blame gradually accumulate. Depressed parents, for example, often complain constantly with impoverished inner worlds. When facing their children, they're often listless and disinterested. Children in this environment hide emotional needs while being forced to mature prematurely. They often think, "I must be perfect to avoid making my parents feel worse." The third type, volatile parents, are characterized by inconsistent attitudes, alternating between warmth and coldness. Unpredictable, addictive parents and antisocial parents belong to this category. These parents cause deeper pain than others. Addictive parents might be caring normally, but when indulging in alcohol, gambling, or gaming, they transform completely. For example, when a child brings home a perfect test, a sober father might pat his head with a reward, while a drunk one might shred it, yelling, "What's studying good for?" Or else you'll end up a failure like me. But when sober, they feel guilty, regretful, apologize to their child, and even overcompensate. The children in such families have bittersweet memories. Their entire childhood is filled with unpredictable parenting patterns. As adults, they may suffer high anxiety, constantly questioning, "Am I worthy of love?" and feeling deeply insecure. Now, consider antisocial parents. They appear normal but lack guilt and empathy internally. Thus, they act recklessly without inner torment. With children, they habitually control, like deliberately using hurtful words. Their children desperately try understanding and excusing parental behavior. Some children say, "He just had a lapse. He didn't mean it." The result, children stay in danger yet refuse to escape. The fourth type, "I'm only doing this for your own good," parents. According to the author, these parents all claim it's for your good. They likely form the largest group of emotionally neglectful parents. As mentioned, the first three types can also fit this for your good category. For example, authoritarian parents love children, but believe, "Spare the rod, spoil the child," thinking harshness benefits them. Similarly, workaholic parents aim to provide materially, but wrongly equate wealth with happy childhoods. Hearing this, you might ask, If parents love deeply and pay constant attention, can children still suffer neglect? It's entirely possible. Loving a child differs completely from forming emotional connections. Even well-meaning parents cause neglect by failing to provide what children truly crave internally. So what are the consequences of long-term emotional neglect? In part 2, we'll explore this issue. If adult life is a house, childhood is its foundation. A house can be built on flawed foundations. It may look normal, but cracked, uneven, or weak foundations create serious stability and safety risks. Children who experienced emotional neglect in childhood may seem normal as adults on the surface, but their inner selves are deficient. In the book, the author summarizes their 5 common traits. First is a strong sense of emptiness. Emptiness itself isn't an illness. Unlike anxiety or depression, it doesn't significantly disrupt daily life. It's more like an uncomfortable feeling, an intermittent, unsatisfiable sense of lack, something off but hard to pin down. It makes people feel isolated, as if they should enjoy life more but feel empty instead, even preventing them from sustaining long-term intimate relationships. Because their inner world is barren, they can't give love and don't know how to receive it. Secondly, there's a lack of accurate self-awareness. People who've experienced emotional neglect often have low self-esteem, so they view themselves negatively, exaggerating weaknesses and downplaying strengths. Even when not getting attention or affirmation, their first reaction is self-blame, thinking they have a fatal flaw. A fatal flaw isn't an actual defect, but a genuine feeling. Let's look at an example. Kelly is the second daughter in her family, 4 years younger than her sister. Her parents, too busy with work, imposed strict rules. They wore identical clothes, had matching haircuts, and even had the same bedtime since childhood. Kelly's sister felt this was extremely unfair and resented Kelly intruding into every part of her life. Young Kelly was also suffering, not understanding why her sister despised everything she did. So she concluded, it must be because I'm unlovable that my sister hates me. Later in middle school, whenever she had friend conflicts or boyfriend breakups, she'd think, people won't like me once they know the real me. This is what Kelly perceived as her fatal flaw. When the author met Kelly in her 30s, she rarely started conversations and always expected rejection everywhere. Despite her rich inner world, to avoid others touching her perceived fatal flaw, she deliberately made herself seem dull. Moreover, they struggle to care for themselves and others, leading to counterdependency. Counterdependency refers to a fear of relying on others. Unlike not wanting to bother people, counterdependent folks go all out to avoid dependence, even at high costs. Think about those friends around us who refuse to seek help no matter what happens. They're likely victims of emotional neglect. The reason is simple. Children are like sponges, absorbing parental love and care. Sponges too far from water dry out and harden. Similarly, those deprived of childhood love struggle to love others appropriately as adults. When entering intimate relationships, they feel uncomfortable and resistant.
So, how to distinguish healthy independence from excessive counterdependency?
The author lists typical signs: frequent depressive feelings, persistent urges to flee or die without cause, lonely childhood memories despite apparent happiness, friends complaining you're distant, difficulty asking for help, discomfort in intimacy, etc. If several apply, you're likely counterdependent. Additionally, emotionally neglected people often develop alexithymia. What is alexithymia? It's also called emotional muteness or inability to articulate feelings. Sufferers can't identify their own or others' emotions, nor express feelings properly. Unrecognized emotions often manifest as undifferentiated anger. Thus, they lash out inexplicably, damaging relationships and perpetuating emotional isolation. This traps them in loneliness. Lastly, the emotionally neglected have poor self-discipline. They compulsively do harmful things: junk food binges, overspending, self-indulgence. Conversely, they avoid necessary tasks, chores, work responsibilities, exercise. Their mantra, I'm so sick of myself. I won't lift a finger once I start something.
Why?
Their parents rarely helped build self-discipline systems. Controlling parents demanded compliance but ignored habit formation. Low support parents never pushed children to do necessary but unwanted tasks, depriving them of discipline's benefits. For those who've experienced emotional neglect, feelings like emptiness, numbness, self-doubt, guilt, self-blame, and pain become shameful secrets. Over time, negative emotions erode life's foundations like floodwaters on a riverbed, wearing away experiences, motivations, self-esteem, and love for life until self-abandonment sets in. In extreme cases, suicidal tendencies emerge. The harm of emotional neglect is undeniable. But as the author notes, if you suffered neglect growing up, skills others learn naturally must be consciously developed in adulthood. Mastering a skill takes effort, requiring time and conscious work. Facing your inner self is hard, but avoidance only steers you further off course. So how can you regain momentum and turn things around? Next, we'll enter part 4, how to mitigate the consequences of emotional neglect. First, clearly recognize the difficulty of change. Rome wasn't built in a day. Prepare for a long struggle. When receiving genuine care after neglect, you'll likely feel intense discomfort. Suddenly, familiar things feel alien and unsafe, a completely natural reaction. Don't let discomfort block you. Cross this barrier to embrace healthy relationships.
Beyond this, two crucial tasks remain.
First, recognize emotions' importance and learn to process them properly. As mentioned, emotionally neglected people harbor floods of negativity, often labeled oversensitive or self-pitying. They see negative emotions as burdens to ignore or discard. But these emotions aren't burdens, they're survival necessities. They signal danger, when to flee, and when to fight. Sadness reminds us we've lost something important. Disgust tells us to avoid certain things. Emotions are your body's language, helping you adapt, survive, and thrive. Moreover, emotions nourish human connections. These connections help overcome inner emptiness and existential anxiety, giving life depth and richness. Therefore, scientifically facing negative emotions is a key step in healing emotional neglect wounds. So, how should we properly handle emotions? The author outlines 4 steps. First, identify and name your feelings. Close your eyes, imagine a blank screen, and focus all your attention on it. Ask yourself, what am I feeling now? And then describe it with multiple words like sadness, disappointment, regret, etc. This step is particularly hard for those with alexithymia, but don't be discouraged. With professional guidance and practice, your inner voice will become clearer. Second, learn to monitor your feelings. If you identify sadness, close your eyes again and ask, what's happening in my life causing this? Does this sadness feel familiar? Have I often felt this sad before? If yes, explore when it happened, why, and so on. Third, trust and accept your feelings. Emotionally neglected people deeply believe feelings are bad, burdensome to others, and self-damning. But remember, emotions aren't always rational. Every feeling arises for a reason. Though powerful, emotions can still be mastered. Fourth, learn to express emotions effectively. A powerful way to harness emotions is expressing them appropriately, not impulsively, but assertively and calmly. Express with empathy. For example, imagine queuing at a cinema when someone cuts in front. If assertive and calm, you won't suppress rage or scream insults. You tap their shoulder and quietly, but firmly say, "Excuse me, sir. The end of the line is back there." Though unsure they'll comply, you've expressed yourself, not letting feelings fester internally. After mastering emotional processing, learn self-compassion. The second crucial task. Emotionally neglected people treat themselves harshly, ignoring desires, suppressing feelings, denying self-worth, demanding perfection, lacking self-sympathy. At this point, only by practicing self-compassion can you free yourself from the impact of emotional neglect. How exactly can you do this? The author offers 4 suggestions. First, learn self-care by prioritizing yourself, develop your interests, tend to your emotions, while also adjusting diet and exercising for better health. Second, improve self-discipline. The author recommends the 3 things plan. Daily complete 3 unwanted tasks or stop 3 tempting but unwise actions, recording each. This plan isn't about depriving joy. If chocolate cake isn't a major issue, no need to restrain. Third, master self-soothing through long baths, light music, playing with kids, walks, cleaning, or meditation to uplift yourself. You can also relax through self-dialogue. For instance, whisper, "This is temporary. Feelings don't last forever. You tried your best, even without perfect results. Wait, things will resolve." Finally, cultivate self-sympathy.
How specifically?
2 key approaches. First, follow the reverse golden rule. Treat yourself as you'd treat others. Just as you wouldn't punish loved ones over small matters, don't punish yourself either. Tell yourself, everyone makes mistakes. It's normal. While you patiently listen to others and notice their emotions. Now also listen to your inner voice and honor your emotional needs. Second, focus forward rather than harshly blaming the past. When you err and want to rage at yourself, remember, anger helps nothing and drains energy. Focus on learning. Use self-questioning to trace causes, like mentally replaying a car breakdown from forgetting to refuel.
Initially, you might blame. What was I thinking?
I should have refueled right after lunch today. Then ask, why didn't I refuel? Was something urgent happening? Ask how to prevent recurrence. This shifts focus from blame to future improvement. Beyond these methods, psychologists suggest filtering social relationships, prioritizing people who care about our emotions, and learning from them how to nurture emotional needs, helping us improve further. All right, that covers the main content of this book. Emotional neglect theory. Since Dr. Webb proposed it, it has remained a hot topic in child psychology, especially in Chinese families where relationships are more reserved and implicit. Many parents work tirelessly to provide food and clothing but neglect children's emotional needs. Yet while blaming parents is easy, teaching reserved individuals to express love poses real challenges. Attributing negative traits to emotional neglect is simple. Changing oneself is hard. While childhood shapes us, we're ultimately responsible for our adult selves and future family relationships. After reading this book, may you understand your past and gain strength to choose your future. Well, that concludes our interpretation of The Neglected Child, How to Overcome Childhood Emotional Neglect. Reading notes are below the audio. See you next time.